Hi guys, how are you today? After a hard-working day, let's relax with this journey through history. We will travel back to the Middle Ages, a time filled with knighthood, chivalry, and struggles, both noble and grim. As we settle into the past, take a deep breath and allow the rhythms of history to guide you into a gentle exploration of what life was really like for a knight. Imagine yourself in the year 1100, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, the sound of hooves pounding against cobblestones, and the rustle of heavy armor. As a knight, you'd be called to serve, to fight, and to follow a strict code of conduct. Yet, behind the polished armor and gleaming sword, life was far from glamorous. If you're as excited as we are to dive into this captivating journey, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more adventures into the past. Let's uncover the mysteries of the Middle Ages together. Hit that bell icon too, so you're always first in line for the next historical adventure. Tonight, we will unfold the delicate, often harsh details of a knight's daily life. We will immerse ourselves in the routines, struggles, and intricate roles that shaped their existence. As we explore, imagine yourself walking through the creaky wooden halls of a medieval castle, feeling the weight of your armor and the silent pressure of honor that hung in the air. Let us begin with the realities of what it truly meant to be a knight. So settle in, fluff your pillow, maybe light a candle. Let's dim the lights and take a deep, relaxing breath. Imagine yourself standing in a narrow stone hallway, the smell of sweat and iron heavy in the air. You are donned in thick layers of armor, each piece a reminder of the heavy burden you must carry, not only on your shoulders but also in your heart. Knights were revered figures, bound by a strict code of chivalry, expected to be paragons of virtue, strength, and loyalty. Yet beneath the polished armor and the prestigious title, their lives were not as heroic as legend would have you believe. Your morning begins early, before the first light of dawn creeps through the small, narrow windows of the castle. The stone floors are cold beneath your boots as you make your way to the armory. The clinking of metal rings fills the silence as you begin the laborious task of donning your armor. Each piece is heavy, pressing against your body, restricting your movements. The process is long and tedious, as armor was meticulously crafted to protect you in battle, but it comes at a cost. Comfort is sacrificed for survival. Once dressed, you step outside, and the sharp morning air stings your face. The ground beneath you is rough and uneven, a mixture of dirt and stone. The rhythmic sound of hooves pounding the earth is constant as your fellow knights, also dressed in armor, preparing their horses for the day's duties. You are trained in the art of combat, but much of your day is spent preparing for something that may never come, the clash of swords, the call to battle. But not all of a knight's life is spent in preparation for war. Much of your time is dedicated to maintaining your skills. You practice your swordplay, your archery, your ability to command in the heat of battle. The training is relentless, with no time for rest. Every movement must be precise, every swing of the sword is deliberate. But physical exhaustion is not the only challenge you face. The mental strain of constantly living up to the ideals of chivalry wears on you. Chivalry, the code to which you must adhere, demands that you be a protector of the weak, a defender of justice, and a servant to your lord. But behind these noble ideals lies the harsh reality of your station. Your life is dictated by the orders of those above you, lords, kings, and bishops, who call upon you for service at any given moment. You have little freedom, as your life is bound to the needs of the feudal system. Your actions, your choices, your very existence are dictated by the hierarchy of medieval society. The meals you eat are simple, often consisting of bread, cheese, and perhaps a small portion of meat if you are fortunate. While you may enjoy the occasional feast in the Great Hall, those moments of indulgence are fleeting. Most days your meals are far from luxurious, and the constant toil leaves you with little time to savor what little you have. The kitchens are cramped, and the air smells of roasting meat, garlic, and stale bread. After the day's training and duties, you retire to a small, cold chamber. The bed is hard, the linens threadbare, and the stone walls do little to keep out the damp chill. There is little comfort, no soft sheets or warm blankets to ease your tired body. You lie awake at night, the weight of your armor, your obligations, and your fears pressing against you. reminding you of the cost of your station. Life as a knight is a constant struggle. It's a life of discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. The promise of glory and honor is ever present, but it is often overshadowed by the grim realities of day-to-day existence. It's a life shaped by duty, and the burden of that duty is never far from your mind. As the day wears on, you find yourself moving from one task to the next, never quite able to rest. Knights were not simply warriors. They were expected to be scholars, strategists, and even diplomats. The life of a knight was often shaped by their obligations to their lord, their duty to their family, and the constant expectations of their station. But despite the great honors that come with the title, there is little room for personal leisure or peace. Your every action must be justified, your every word measured, and your behavior scrutinized by both your peers and those above you. When you are not training, you are expected to attend meetings, receive orders, and provide counsel. These moments, too, are not without their burdens. The halls of the castle echo with the voices of lords, ladies, and other knights, all vying for attention, their words filled with expectation and pressure. You must remain composed, measured in your responses, never allowing yourself to show the weight of your thoughts. The castle's great hall is a place of both camaraderie and rivalry. Here, knights speak of war, politics, and honor, their voices rising and falling like the rhythm of a steady drum. Yet, beneath the formal conversations, there lingers a quiet tension. Everyone is aware of the ever-present possibility of battle, of the constant threat that war could break the monotony of daily life and lead to a clash of steel. But when the battle does come, it does not arrive as a moment of glory. No, it creeps slowly into your life. The call to arms is not a single cry of excitement, but a heavy, looming command that weighs down on you. Imagine the nights before battle, when sleep comes fitfully, filled with visions of the unknown. There is no excitement, no anticipation, only the quiet dread of what may await you on the battlefield. And when the call comes, you rise, slipping into your armor once more, and head out, the weight of your responsibilities pressing down on you. The weight of the armor is a constant companion. It restricts your movement, forces you to move in slow, deliberate motions. The helmet, heavy and encasing, limits your vision, muffling the sounds of the world around you. Yet you have no choice but to endure. The armor is both your protection and your prison. It is the armor of a knight, designed to defend you from the blows of battle, but also a constant reminder of the violence you are expected to engage in. There is little room for comfort in this life. You are always prepared for the next fight, the next challenge, the next command. And yet, amid the strain and the constant demand for your attention, there are moments, fleeting, brief, almost imperceptible, that offers some respite. In the quiet moments before dawn, you might take a brief walk through the castle courtyard. The cobblestones are cold beneath your boots. The silence is broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The distant sound of the blacksmith's hammer echoes through the morning air, a rhythmic pulse that seems to settle the soul, if only for a moment. The castle is still, its inhabitants asleep, unaware of the heavy burden you bear. The life of a knight is far from what the legends would have you believe. There is no constant glory, no unrelenting excitement. It is a life of discipline, of hardship, and of an unwavering commitment to those who depend on you. It is a life of sacrifice, one that leaves little room for personal happiness or peace. And yet, you continue, driven by duty, bound by a code that does not allow you to rest, even when the weight of the world feels unbearable. The burdens of knighthood are often hidden beneath the surface, obscured by the shining armor and the tales of valor. But in truth, the life of a knight is filled with moments of exhaustion, isolation, and a constant search for meaning in a world that offers little rest. The rhythm of their lives is one of unrelenting duty, where personal desires are often cast aside in favor of service to a cause greater than themselves. And so, as you stand in the courtyard, gazing out at the distant horizon, you cannot help but wonder, is this what you expected? Was this the life you had imagined when you first donned the armor, when you first pledged your loyalty to your lord? The weight of your sword presses heavily against your side, constant a reminder that you are always at the ready. Your life, it seems, will never be your own. But such is the fate of a knight, bound by honor, duty, and the unyielding demands of the world around them. As we turn the page from the quiet, unrelenting daily life of a knight, we now find ourselves gazing upon a figure whose name still echoes through the halls of history. King Richard I, better known as Richard the Lionheart. He was a knight who rose to prominence through his courage, his leadership, and his relentless pursuit of glory on the battlefield. However, as we delve into the life of this legendary king, we will discover that his story is not just one of triumph, but also of sacrifice, loss, and the toll that war takes on the heart and mind. Imagine, for a moment, standing in the great hall of a medieval castle, the stone walls thick with the weight of history. The air is cool yet filled with the sounds of bustling preparations. The flickering light of torches dances on the walls, casting long, wavering shadows. In the midst of this, you hear the low rumble of voices, whispers of a king, a leader, a warrior, who is about to embark on a journey that will take him far from home, to a land filled with both promise and peril. Richard the Lionheart was born into a world where the rhythm of daily life was punctuated by the clashing of swords and the demands of power. He grew up in a royal court, a place filled with political intrigue, where alliances were made and broken with the slightest shift of a noble's gaze. From a young age, Richard was trained to be a warrior, taught the arts of swordplay, strategy, and leadership. His destiny was clear. He was to be a knight and a king, one who would protect the realm and uphold the honor of the crown. As a young man, Richard's life was already marked by the expectations of those around him. His father, King Henry II, had great plans for his sons, but the relationship between them was strained, filled with tension and rivalry. It was not a peaceful upbringing, nor one filled with the warmth of familial bonds. Instead, Richard was thrust into the harsh world of power struggles, where loyalty was often tested and love was often absent. His heart, filled with ambition and a desire for glory, led him down a path that would see him leave the comforts of his homeland and embark on a crusade. The Third Crusade, an expedition to reclaim Jerusalem from the Saracens, would be Richard's defining journey. As he crossed the seas, the weight of his armor now mirrored the burden of expectation that rested on his shoulders. He was no longer just a knight in a feudal kingdom, but a king at war, one whose actions would be scrutinized by every noble, every soldier, and every peasant in his realm. The pressure to succeed was immense, and the burden of that pressure was not easily carried. But even as Richard led his armies through the harsh desert landscapes of the Holy Land, he was not immune to the human cost of war. The battles were grueling, the losses heavy. In the heat of the desert, the once glorious armor began to feel like a prison, a constant reminder of the violence that he had pledged to carry out in the name of faith. Richard's men, weary from the endless march, looked to him for leadership. He was their beacon, the one who inspired them with his bravery, his unyielding spirit, and his unrelenting drive to succeed. Yet, beneath this veneer of strength, Richard was a man torn. The king's heart longed for peace, but war was a constant companion, following him wherever he went. His victories, though celebrated by his men, were often tempered by the high price of human life, both that of his enemies and his own soldiers. Despite his valor, Richard could not escape the weight of the consequences of his actions. He began to question whether the glory of victory was worth the toll it took on the lives of those who followed him. In the midst of this turmoil, Richard's personal life, too, began to unravel. Far from his homeland, separated from his family, and unable to forge meaningful relationships, the loneliness of his position began to seep into his heart. His reign was marked by constant warfare, and though he was hailed as a great king and a warrior of unparalleled skill, there was no respite for him. There were no peaceful evenings spent by the fireside, no quiet moments of reflection. His days were filled with the cries of battle and the heavy silence of solitude. Perhaps most poignantly, Richard never truly saw the fruits of his labor. The crusade, though initially successful in securing some victories, ultimately ended in stalemate. Jerusalem remained out of Christian hands, and Richard's dream of glory on the battlefield faded into the sands of time. The toll of his travels, the strain of constant conflict, and the distance from his kingdom left him weakened, both physically and emotionally. As he returned to England, he found himself in a realm in need of his leadership, but one that no longer had the same honour or promise it once held. King Richard's reign is remembered not only for his courage and his leadership, but for the cost of those qualities. He gave his body and his soul to the ideals of knighthood, yet he was never able to enjoy the peace that should have come with the title of king. His story is one of sacrifice, of a man who sought to be both a knight and a king, but who, in the end, was left with only the burdens of both. Now that we've walked alongside Richard the Lionheart, through the sands of the Holy Land and into the quiet halls of a king's loneliness, let us shift our gaze towards something more enigmatic, something that lingers in the shadows of history, casting a subtle but ever-present influence over the medieval knightly world. It is the culture, the mysteries, and the unsolved riddles that surround the knights of this era, creating an aura of intrigue that continues to captivate our imagination to this day. Imagine yourself once again in the stone chambers of a medieval castle, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. There is a strange, almost tangible sense of the unknown that permeates the air. The knights of this time, with their codes of honour, their swordsmanship, and their commitment to chivalry, were not merely warriors. They were part of a complex web of beliefs and rituals that blended the sacred with the mundane, the historical with the mystical. One of the greatest mysteries to emerge from this period was the enigmatic order of the Knights Templar. Founded during the First Crusade, this group of knights quickly gained a reputation for their skill in battle and their strict adherence to the Christian faith. But as their influence grew, so did the whispers and legends surrounding them. The Templars became the subject of numerous myths, tales of secret treasures, hidden knowledge, and a mysterious connection to the ancient mysteries of the world. Imagine the Templar Knights, their white mantles emblazoned with a red cross, moving through the world with a quiet, almost otherworldly presence. Their primary role, at least officially, was to protect Christian pilgrims on their journey to the Holy Land. However, there were rumours that they had stumbled upon something far more profound during their time in Jerusalem. Some say they uncovered ancient relics, possibly even the Holy Grail, or knowledge lost to time. The truth of these stories remains shrouded in mystery, leaving us to wonder what secrets the Templars may have kept hidden, perhaps even to their own detriment. The order was eventually disbanded in the early 14th century, but not before their influence reached across Europe, leaving behind a legacy that would spark centuries of speculation. Were the Templars mere soldiers, as history suggests, or were they custodians of something far older, something lost to time? The mystery of the Templars continues to captivate historians, researchers, and storytellers alike, their legends growing with each passing year. But the mysteries surrounding the knights were not confined solely to secret orders or hidden relics. The very nature of knighthood itself was steeped in symbolism, ritual, and often superstition. To be a knight was to be part of something greater than oneself, a sacred role that demanded unwavering devotion, not just to one's lord but to the divine. Knights would often undergo elaborate ceremonies of initiation, where they swore an oath of loyalty, promising to defend the weak and uphold justice. These ceremonies were not mere formalities, they were believed to be divinely sanctioned, imbuing the knight with a spiritual power that set him apart from the common man. The sword, for example, was more than just a weapon, it was a symbol of the knight's commitment to the ideals of chivalry. When a knight was dubbed, he would kneel before his lord, his sword placed on his shoulder, and would be formally granted the title of knight. This was not just a title, but a transformation, a moment in which the individual was elevated to a higher status, one that carried with it immense responsibility. The sword itself, now imbued with the weight of the knight's honour, became a key part of his identity. And yet, despite the outward rituals and the strict codes of conduct, there was always a lingering tension in the knightly world, an uncertainty about what lay beyond the world of battle and glory. For in a time where faith and fear often walked hand in hand, knights were also subject to the same fears, doubts, and superstitions as the rest of society. It is no surprise, then, that the knights of the medieval world were deeply entwined with the religious and mystical beliefs of the time. One of the most fascinating aspects of medieval knightly culture is their connection to the supernatural. The idea of divine protection was not just a comforting thought, it was a necessity. Many knights believed that their success in battle was directly linked to the favour of God or the saints. They would often carry relics into battle, pieces of bone, bits of cloth, or other holy objects, believing that these items would protect them from harm. Others believed in the power of curses and divine retribution, fearing that their actions could anger the gods or bring misfortune upon their families. But perhaps the most compelling mystery of the knightly world lies in the question of their true purpose. Were they simply warriors, hired to defend lands and conquer enemies, or were they part of a larger, more complex role in society? Did the knights see themselves as instruments of divine will, or were they, at times, aware of the contradictions that lay within their code of honour? The knights of the medieval world were, after all, products of their time. Men of faith, yet often steeped in violence, defenders of justice, yet often acting as instruments of conquest. Their lives were shaped by the same fears, doubts, and contradictions that marked medieval society as a whole. As we reflect on the mysteries surrounding the knights of this period, we find ourselves drawn into a world where the line between the historical and the mythical is often blurred. The knights of the Middle Ages were not just men of war, they were also men of belief, driven by a code that both defined and limited their existence. Their story is one of paradox, a life of honour and violence, of devotion and doubt. As we transition from the mysteries that have shrouded the knights of the Middle Ages, we now turn our gaze toward the sharp contrast that existed between the knightly elite and the common folk. This final segment seeks to explore the vast differences in daily life for those who lived under the shadow of knighthood, those whose lives were far removed from the shining armour and grand halls of the knights. Here, amid the grim realities of medieval society, we will explore the lives of peasants, labourers, and townsfolk who struggled day in and day out, barely noticeable beneath the grandeur of the knightly world. Imagine the quiet hum of activity as you step from the polished stone halls of the castle to the uneven dirt roads of a medieval village. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, fresh earth, and the distant sound of oxen pulling carts laden with grain. The contrast is immediate. The high ceilings and echoing footsteps of the castle give way to the humble, cluttered simplicity of a village hut. Where knights are often surrounded by luxury and status, the common folk are confined to modest dwellings. Their lives are dictated by the land, the seasons, and the unforgiving whims of nature. The peasants live a life of constant labour. The work never ends. The fields must be tilled, the crops harvested, the animals tended to. Each day is a struggle for survival. There is little room for rest, no time to savour the simple joys of life. The tools they use are simple, often worn and battered by years of constant use. The grains of wheat that fill the air during harvest time are a reminder of the small gains that the labouring class can hope to achieve. They live, it seems, from one season to the next, bound by the rhythms of nature and the demands of the land. Yet, despite their hard work, the common folk have little say in their own fates. They are bound to the land, to the lord who owns it, and to the knight who serves as his enforcer. The lord's land is vast, and the peasants are the ones who toil upon it, often working for little more than a meagre portion of what they produce. Their lives are determined by the ebb and flow of the harvest, the changing seasons, and the looming presence of the knightly class above them. A knight, by contrast, lives a life dictated by a different set of rules, one of honour, duty, and expectation. The knight's obligations to his lord, his king, and his fellow knights are paramount. His service is demanded in times of war and in times of peace. While the commoner struggles for survival, the knight prepares for the future, not with the burden of daily labour, but with the expectation that his actions will shape the fate of kingdoms. The lives of the knights and the commoners could not be more different. In the grand halls of the castle, knights feast upon roasted meats and fine wines, while the peasants sit down to bowls of porridge, their bread dry and hard. The knights sleep in warm, well-appointed chambers, their beds soft and draped in rich fabrics, while the peasants curl up in small, cold huts, their beds little more than straw piled upon the ground. There is little room for luxury in the lives of the common folk. Every day is a struggle, and every meal is earned through sweat and toil. But this contrast is not simply one of wealth and comfort. It is a reflection of the hierarchical structure that defined medieval society. The knights, as part of the noble class, were afforded a higher status, greater protection, and the privilege of power. The peasants, however, had no such protections. They were at the mercy of the lords who owned the land, and the knights who enforced the law. The relationship between the two classes was one of strict division, an unyielding separation that defined the lives of those at both ends of the social spectrum. Even within the knightly class, there were those who existed at the very top, dukes, earls and kings, whose lives were far more luxurious than those of the knights who served them. The knights, though relatively privileged compared to the common folk, were still subjugated by their own vows of service and their duty to protect and uphold the realm. Yet, for the commoners, there was no such duty. Their lives were ruled by necessity, by the need to feed themselves and their families, to survive another harsh winter, to weather the next plague or famine. Despite these contrasts, the lives of knights and commoners were linked in ways that may not always be immediately apparent. The knights, in their quest for glory and their adherence to their code of honour, relied on the labour of the common people. Without the peasants to grow the crops, build the roads, and provide the necessary resources, the knight's world would collapse. It is a reminder that, for all the grandeur of the knightly life, it was built upon the backs of those who lived in the shadows, whose lives were far more difficult, far less glamorous, and far less likely to be remembered in the grand narratives of history. The stark contrast between the knightly class and the common folk serves as a reminder of the complexity of medieval society. While knights fought for honour, their lives were filled with responsibilities, burdens, and personal sacrifices. The common folk, meanwhile, lived lives filled with uncertainty and hardship, their struggles largely ignored by the chroniclers of the time. Yet, in both cases, the reality was one of service, whether to a lord, to a king, or to the land itself. In the end, both the knights and the common folk were bound by forces larger than themselves, by the codes of honour, by the demands of society, and by the unrelenting march of time. The knight's life may have been filled with grandeur, but it was also filled with duty, struggle, and sacrifice. The common folk, though often invisible in the historical record, were the true backbone of medieval society, holding together the world that the knights so often took for granted. As we come to the end of our journey through the life of the medieval knight, we can reflect on the contrasts, the burdens, and the mysterious allure that surrounded this period. The knights, with their honour and their codes, lived lives that were both elevated and constrained. They were warriors, protectors, and leaders. But they were also men burdened by their duties and haunted by the consequences of their actions. The common folk, on the other hand, lived lives of quiet struggle, their contributions largely unseen by the historians who recorded the past. Yet, in the grand tapestry of medieval life, their lives were just as essential to the story. In the end, history is not simply a collection of grand tales of kings and knights, but also a story of the quiet struggles, the unseen sacrifices, and the everyday lives that formed the backbone of society. And as we drift back to the present, we are reminded of the delicate balance between the luxury of knighthood and the hardship of common life, a balance that shaped the rhythm of life in the Middle Ages, and one that still resonates with us today. Thank you for joining us. Rest well, Take care of your beautiful self, whatever that means to you. And until next time,